Welcome to this video, friends. In this one, we're going to take a look at table variables, but I'll also show you a whole bunch of other things that you can do. For example, with converting between one data type to another and so on, okay? So a bit of a hodgepodge, but interesting. A lot of little details. Take a look. So I'm going to use my dbase this time. And remember, the big idea here is table variables. So just as you can have a variable that is, for example, money or integer or nvarchar, you can also have a variable that is essentially a table. And that variable is used, or rather it's created, it's used, and then it's disposed of and it disappears. It's not stored permanently. If you think about the CTEs, the common table expressions, those essentially were temporary result sets. So they were created, essentially, used, and also discarded. So in that sense, at least, they're somewhat similar. And let's take a look here. So I'm going to type declare and then add table var. So we're making a variable, but this variable essentially is a table and not just a simple data type like money. I can store a numerical quantity, okay? I'm going to say table here. And because it is a table variable, you can define its header. So I'm going to say ID of type integer and then a date of the date data type. So table variable with two columns. One is called ID and the other one is called date. The first one has a type of integer and the second one has a type of date. When I say type, I mean the data type. And now we're going to fill this thing. And after we have filled it, we'll grab only some of the records generated in it. And then after that completes, this temporary table variable is discarded, okay? So let's take a look here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to say declare at ID int equals 1. So I'm declaring a simple variable named at ID. And I'm defining it to have the value 1 by default. That's why I have int equals 1. And then at the next stage, I will say while at ID is less than or equal to 1000. So I'm going to generate a temporary table with 1000 records in it using a while loop. To do that, I'm going to type begin and end. Remember, we need the begin and the end so that the block begin and end defines the code that is controlled by the while loop. Okay? Same thing back to a previous video where I demonstrated that using the debugger. So I'm going to say begin end and I will say insert into and then add table variable. And you can do that because remember the table variable is just that, it's a temporary table. So just as you can insert into a regular permanent table that you can view in the Object Explorer, the same principle applies here. You can insert into it. And as before, you can use values. So I'm going to say add ID. And then here, I want to generate some random dates just to show you that you can. And sometimes stuff like that is useful in various kinds of statistical simulations. So imagine I want to generate some random dates. How can I go about that? I can type this. I can type rand. But that's not enough. Okay, hover your mouse over rand and it says it returns a float. It returns some number like, 0.58, for example. How do you make that into a date? Take a look. So we are going to type here convert, and then you're going to put date time as an example, and then close that for a second, okay? Make sure all of the parentheses are matched. And how does this operate? Well, remember, you're going to do it as follows here. You will say date time, and then you've got the rand. So the rand will generate a value, and then will convert that value to a date time. That's all. So we can stick some definite date time values into our temporary table. We'll see in a second whether it actually gives us something useful. And at the next stage, as you might remember, you've got to advance the ID by 1 every time the loop runs. So type set and then at ID equals at ID plus 1. You got to advance it, right? You got to move forward by 1 every time as the loop operates. Otherwise, again, you'll get an infinite loop if you don't do that, if you remember back to that video. Okay, so remember we've got this variable named table var. We've got this ID, default value 1. And I'm doing that. And then within the while loop, we stick in specific values into the table variable. specifically as the loop operates, it's taking a different ID every time, and then you take the random function and use the convert between the random value generated and the date time data type. You're converting from one data type to another. So what you're sticking into the table variable ultimately in the date column is a date time and not some number like 0.58. Now, highlight all of this and then go debug and step into and take a look at the way this will execute here. I'm going to do it just a few times, so make sure you hit step into F11. I'm just going to go through this process. You see that? It's just going to fill it. That's all. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all of it because it's kind of messy and so on, okay? Okay, I'm going to terminate this. So far it's working well. The sequence is correct. Sequence of code lines, that is. So the next stage here, imagine now, I've got this temporary table. I filled it with a huge number of records. I don't want all of them. I want to be able to just grab a bunch. I want to be able to just grab a subset that matches some certain condition that I've made up. Okay, so I'm going to say this. I'm going to say select star into, and I'm going to say perma table, meaning permanent table. So remember, the table variable is temporary. It vanishes, like it's like a ghost. But this line will now subset some of those records and copy them out into a permanent table, okay? That means one viewable in the Object Explorer. So select star into permanent table, and I'm going to say from at table var. And you can do that because remember, table var exists. Now take a look at this one thing. Take a look. Imagine I do all of this, and after the end that closes the while loop, I put go, just because I feel like it. And immediately take a look. Table var gets underlined red, and it says must declare the table variable at table var. So that means that the go here limits the scope of the table variable. You see that? It defines the scope. When you put the go in, the table variable becomes inaccessible outside the highlighted area. You can't reach it beyond there. So in a certain sense, as you can see, go can also be used to define the scope of a variable, where it exists, where it's accessible. All right, let me remove that for a second. And then after the end, instead put a semicolon. And notice that that doesn't happen with the semicolon, you see? All right, so highlight all of this and just give it a go. Hit execute. And it says on the bottom, query completed successfully. All right, you've got one row affected. That's good. At the next stage, remember, this here will simply copy all of them, right? Because it just says select star into perma table from table variable. All right, I'm going to remove the semicolon. I just want to show you the difference in this particular example. Imagine at the next stage, I want to just grab a subset of the records stuck into the table variable, not all of them. So I can do that as follows. I will say where, and then year, and then date. And this is all available because remember, date is coming from the table variable. It has that column. It is so because we declared it up top. And the year is simply a function that will get the year out of it. Okay? The date is basically made of like a month, a day, and a year. You can take the year part out of it, you see? With the year function. All right, and I'm going to say between 1950 as an example and 2017. All right, now remember, because we ran select star into perma table, that means perma table now exists. Which means if you try to run the code, you're going to get an error. So you got to drop it first. I'm going to say drop table, perma table. Drop it first. Remember, there's always a consequence to everything that you do. Execute that. Drop that first. And now take a look. I'm going to run all of this code again from top to bottom. Execute. All right, let's take a look at the output down below. So it's generating some records for us. I want to take a look at those records. So to do that, remember, the select star into perma table means now there's a permanent table named perma table. I will say select star from perma table. All right, and execute that. Let's take a look down below at the output. And as you can see, there's not much there. Huh? It's not very interesting. So something is going wrong. we're not getting any error messages. So take a look here. Go back to the line right here where we say insert into, and you see you've got the random value. Take that random value and scale it, or multiply, in other words, by say 50,000. Why would I do that? Well, we just saw that we didn't see any records inside our perma table, so it wasn't useful. Okay, let me drop perma table again, hit execute, and then highlight all of this code again, and then execute. All right, and now select perma table again, and let's look inside it. And now, as you can see, it's quite different, isn't it? You've got a whole bunch of randomly selected dates, and if you look through them carefully, they all appear to be between about, what did I say there? 1950 and 2017, if you look through them carefully, see? I just want to make sure. See that? And further, if you look at the ID, okay, the ID is, let's see. The ID goes 2, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 17. The ID is kind of random too, because remember, we essentially chose by the dates randomly. The dates are randomly generated. So everything is working as expected here, okay? Another thing that I want to show is this. Let's drop perma table again. It's gone. And imagine that you don't include these lines right here that I've just highlighted together with the whole code before them. So in other words, like this, I'm going to run that by itself and then hit execute. And that's going to be fine, right? But now try to run these lines separately, the select star into perma table. Try to run those separately, hit execute. And it says query executed with errors, and it says table var does not exist. So that is telling us something important, that this quantity at table var is gone. That's it. It's defined the way I ran it within the highlighted area, within the highlighted code. After that, it disappears. So if you want to make sure that you access it before it vanishes, highlight everything and then run this. Okay, that is it, friends. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.